South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol is under pressure to step down or face impeachment. Protesters marched in the capital city of Seoul Wednesday after Yoon declared martial law the night before. The move drew intense backlash, including from members of his own party. He lifted the order after 6 hours. Opposition lawmakers have now filed for impeachment, which, if approved, would trigger a vote to replace Yoon within 60 days. South Korea only became a democracy in the late 1980s. Before then, it was not uncommon for leaders to declare martial law to keep their hold on power. However, the country hasn't experienced anything like this in decades. And Robert Kelly joins me now. He's a professor of political science at South Korea's Pusan National University. So, Robert, thanks for joining us today. What's your understanding of why President Yoon made the decision to declare martial law in the first place?
Right. This is actually something of a mystery because the enunciated reasons seem to be that he was frustrated by gridlock in the parliament, which is controlled by the opposition, and he has been upset with the prosecution of members of his cabinet and investigation of his wife. His wife is sort of this kind of Marie Antoinette kind of figure in Korean politics, and she's been investigated a lot by the opposition. That's really gotten under his skin. But I think what really sort of upsets people a lot is the perception that martial law is this just enormous overreaction to the fairly typical back and forth of democracies, right? I mean, gridlock in a legislature is something that almost every democracy has to grapple with. And I think that's what people are really wondering about. And we're kind of waiting for President Yoon to go out and speak to the public to give an explanation that seems better than I tried to overthrow the government because of parliamentary maneuvers. That seems so, out of proportion.
And to that point, Robert, do you think that this incident, if you will, exposes a vulnerability in South Korea's system of democracy in terms of what it represents?
Right. Actually, there's been a lot of discussion about this, or is South Korea more fragile than we think? I actually think no. My sense is that this was a stress test, if you will, of South Korea's institutions, and that South Korea actually passed. By which I mean that it's, any elected politician can suddenly act out and do crazy, bizarre things, right? I mean, it looks an awful lot like, for example, in this case, that President Yoon did this impulsively, that he may have made up his mind to do this the very same day. We're still waiting to hear this. That's inevitable, right? You're always going to have sort of individuals misbehaving and doing outlandish stuff. The question is, how do institutions respond? Right? Is there a proper pushback to sort of, maintain the guardrails, as it were? And in the South Korean case, that was true. The population mobilized to come and rally in front of the Parliament building. The opposition parliamentarians rallied to the opposition. The press was not cowed. The military seems to have been divided. We still don't know about that. There's going to be a big investigation about how complicit the military was in this. But I would argue that South Korea came through this actually pretty well, right? I mean, it looked at, when it first hit, it looked like this big crisis and stuff. And then 6 hours later, it was over. And people who had sort of slept through it, because it was initially announced at around 10:30 and it was rolled back around 5 a.m. Some people just slept through the entire thing and woke up and went to work the next day. So I actually think that, I would actually argue that this sort of demonstrates that South Korea's democracy is quite robust.
When you think about the relationship that South Korea has with the U.S., obviously they're an ally. There's nearly 30,000 troops that are based there. We know that President Yoon was actually at a state dinner not too long ago at the White House last year where he's saying American pie. So how could the last 48 hours affect South Korea standing on the world stage, not just with the United States, but to see something like that? Yes, it was quick and over and done with, but the idea of what happened, the close proximity to North Korea.
Right. Yeah, it's a real shame. I mean, President Yoon seemed to have a good relationship with Biden, and, they were singing on TV. And I mean, it was actually pretty nice, right? I'm an American. I live in South Korea. It's nice to see the two leaders getting along like that. And I think this is, Yoon has just destroyed his reputation with this. It's kind of a shame. Because it ended so rapidly, I don't actually think there's going to be too many strategic impacts on the U.S. relationship. I think if this had gone on, then the United States would have been in a pretty awkward position, including U.S. military forces on the peninsula would be sort of caught in this strange, awkward situation. I would imagine that's actually one of the reasons why the president agreed to roll this all back, because I think he realized that this was beginning to spill out of control. But the initial, I think there's some criticism of the initial response of the Biden administration that they kind of didn't really say very much after this was announced. And I think maybe we kind of ducked a bullet, if you will, in the alliance, and that this kind of resolved itself before the United States was forced to take a stand on this. If the North Koreans are going to take advantage of it, I mean, they have traditionally sort of tried to be troublemakers during South Korean elections. The time for North Korea to do that was yesterday. At this point, South Korea is sort of normal again. South Korea's gone through an impeachment, so having another impeachment isn't actually a humongous constitutional crisis. So the North Koreans had their chance and missed it. I think the big takeaway, honestly, the biggest impact to my mind will probably be economic, which is to say foreign investors will be a little bit spooked. The bond market will take a hit. The South Korean won will drop. The currency will drop. The South Korean exchange rate will drop, and that kind of stuff, because investors will say, "Whoa, we thought South Korea was stable and it's not," and they'll pull back.
Yeah, all very significant things to consider. Professor Robert Kelly, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.